Hey everybody, welcome back. I know what you're thinking. I've said it before. I guess I'm going to have to say it again. It's another Klipsch upgrade video. I get a lot of these. People send in a lot of Klipsch speakers. For the same reason that we get every other speaker that's sent in, for some reason, they are not happy with how they sound. And I get a lot of Klipsch owners sending in their speakers because they're just not happy with how they sound. I understand. Sometimes they measure very poorly, and the parts quality is always really poorly, or really poor. So we went through this just like we've done everything else, and there's some of the same problems that we found with this earlier model that we found with some of the newer models. And this is the model RF-82 2, like version 2 of the RF-82, I guess. So the thing that we saw that was a problem with a lot of the others, like the Klipsch 8000s, the 6000s, is we've got drivers here that are playing the same signal. They're playing parallel. And the acoustic center is here. The acoustic center of the tweeter, way up here. So we have a long acoustic center spacing, which causes a greater level of cancellation as you move up and down. And this one had quite a bit of cancellation in the vertical off axis, as you can imagine. So we went in and we made it a 2.5 way, which means only this driver plays up to the tweeter. So we're shortening the acoustic centers. We're bringing this in at a lower frequency to help with the bottom end, so they're in parallel at the very bottom end. But as frequency increases, only that one crosses to the tweeter. So that improves things a lot as far as giving it a better vertical dispersion without causing so much cancellation. Also, parts quality, again, is really poor, and we've gone up on that a lot. But let's look at some of the before and afters. Let's look at the on-axis response of the original. If you look at it, you see there's a dipped area there between the tweeter's response and the response of the woofers. So I'm thinking, okay, is it an amplitude issue or is it a phase issue? And the one quick and easy way to tell if it's a phase issue is just start moving the microphone up and moving it down. And if you see major changes going on, it's a phase issue. That means everything from the tweeters arriving a little out of time from everything coming from the woofers. So let's look at this on-axis response, and then let's look at the vertical off-axis, and we see a pretty deep suck-out develop right there between the woofers and the tweeters as we move up. Now, to confirm that it's a major cancellation, out of phase situation, even on the tweeter axis, we also started taking the measurements going down and found as we moved down 4 inches at a time, the time arrival of these got better. So let's look at the vertical off axis going down, and you can see that it gets better as you go down, at least to a point. So if you have these speakers and they're in their stock form, one of the things you can do to help is to tilt them back a little bit and help get yourself down on the woofer axis, or raise them up, get them up off the floor a little higher, put them on some stands, because the time arrival is best if you're in line with the woofers, our top woofer, and not in line with the tweeter. If you're at a normal seating distance or seating height, and this is sitting on the ground, which it's not now, it's lifted up off the ground about 12 inches or 10 inches here. So you can see the whole thing in the video when it's not behind the table. But if you're on tweeter axis when you're seated, you're going to hear that big hole in the response there. So it's definitely a problem. If you look at the impedance curve, it's a pretty high spike there in between the two, and the tweeter level is more of an 8 ohm load, where the woofer level, it's a 4 ohm load. If you look at the spectral decay, you'll not see a whole lot of ringing there. It's not that bad. There's a tiny little trace up to the tweeter, and there's some residual stored energy there in the woofer's response. Not bad, though. So let's look at what we're able to do with this thing. And and the horizontal off axis. If we look at the horizontal off axis of it originally, you'll see it just mirror images the on axis, and it just drops off as you move left or right. So it's not great in that regard, but it's okay. Let's look at what we're able to do with this. Now we can look at the individual tweeter's response, the response of the upper woofer, and then down low you see the response of the lower woofer. And combined they make a nice, smooth, summed response, nice and balanced all the way across. Much smoother than it was. In fact, let's put a before and an after frequency response on there, and we can see the difference there, how much better things are when they arrive in time and in phase, and they sum accurately. Now, why the engineers at Klipsch never fix this kind of thing, I don't know. And I beat on them on this in several of the other videos that we've done. And then recently they've come out with what they call the Mark II versions of some of these latest models they've had, and they've gone in and they've corrected this very thing. So hopefully some of the newer models going forward are not as bad as a lot of these older models as far as time arrival. They've gone in, because myself and maybe others as well have really beat on them on that, and they've gone back to the drawing board and they've redesigned the crossover on some of that stuff. Crossovers are still using some of the same budget level parts, but at least some of the physical problems are not in some of the newer models like they have been on some of the older ones. Even though this one has some of that problem, it's not near as bad as some of the other models. That 8000 and some of those were a lot worse. And the tweeter level is not that much hotter than the woofers. They're pretty balanced on this model. And of course, once we redid it, it's very balanced and smooth all the way across. If we look at the horizontal off axis now, it drops off a little more evenly than it did before. And now the vertical off axis, as we move up vertically, we notice it maintains a much more consistent response all the way across. I mean, let's pull up the old vertical off axis and compare it to the new vertical off axis, and you can see quite a dramatic difference there. So it should give you a much more consistent in-room response. New impedance curve is a little smoother. The impedance is now the same on both ends. We're using more of an L pad to bring the tweeter levels down instead of just an inline resistor, so it's the same impedance on both ends. And because we did it as a 2.5 way and not a 2-way, the actual impedance is a little higher. We're up there around 6 ohms instead of down around, this one was at 4 ohms. In fact, I'm reading the fine print here. It was right at 4 ohms originally. Now we're up to about 6 ohms. So it's a lot easier load. We did give up some sensitivity when we made it a 2.5 way, but the sensitivity is still really high, where it's still at 90.5, 91 dB sensitivity. So it's still going to give you plenty of output. Spectral decay, if we look at that, it's a little cleaner now across the board and a lot more balanced. So we did a lot for this one. And as you can imagine, we've done a lot for these Klipsch models. And the total for all this, all new crossover parts, a set of tube connectors to replace the cheesy binding posts. I hate the binding posts. All new wiring and 4 sheets of no-res that'll help take care of something. That one's a really hollow box. Take care of the resonances of the box. That always tightens up the bass response, gives you better vocals, cleans up the whole bottom end, makes things much more powerful and tight. $825 was the total. $825 is the total cost to fix the whole thing, the whole package. We can send that out to you, and we can help support you with it as well. If you have questions, we'll walk you through any aspect of it. If you get stuck or you have questions, or you want to send us photos of your crossover before you solder it and all that kind of stuff, no problem. Happens all the time. For any of those guys who have questions, if you're not new to DIY, this is probably a pretty easy one for you. It doesn't involve a huge amount of parts. There's quite a few on the tweeter, but not as many as on some of the other Klipsch models. So I would say this one is about middle of the road as far as time and difficulty compared to some of the other Klipsch upgrades that we've done. So like again I say, if you're into DIY, then this is an easy upgrade, no brainer, no problem. That's it for this video, and I appreciate you guys watching yet another Klipsch upgrade video. Keep them coming. We'll keep fixing them, and see you guys in the next one.